Hello class. Today we'll be looking at the Franco-Prussian War. So you will be able to describe the outcome of the Franco-Prussian War and explain how the Franco-Prussian War leads to World War I. We're starting our unit on World War I, and I believe the best way to do that is to look at the Franco-Prussian War. And I was vindicated when visiting the Musée de l'Armée in France, and the French Army Museum starts their World War I exhibit with the Franco-Prussian War, which I was very excited to see. So even the government of France agrees that World War I really starts not in 1914 with an assassination, but in the Franco-Prussian War, well before that. So in order to understand the Franco-Prussian War, we actually need to talk about Napoleon and the Congress of Vienna. The Congress of Vienna was the meeting that happened. A Congress is a meeting. So this is a meeting that happened in Vienna, where the European nations around Europe gather to talk about what should happen after Napoleon's defeated. What are they going to do with the map of Europe, with all the territory that he had conquered? He'd redrawn the map of Europe. What were they going to do? How were they going to undo what Napoleon did? And importantly, make sure there weren't any new Napoleons that would pop up from any country, not just France. So, in order to do that, what they decide to do is redraw the map of Europe. This was how the map looked when Napoleon was building his French Empire. Again, the dark purple is territories he directly controlled. Light purple is areas he turned into puppet states. And the pink were allies of Napoleon's, typically because they lost to him in war, and then he made them become his allies. The new map of Europe looks like this. So when you look at this map, what do you notice about the new map of Europe? One of the things that should jump out to you is that France has been cut down to size. Quite literally, it's lost the territory it took from Italy and where modern-day Croatia. It has also lost Belgium, and the Netherlands have become their own countries. Germany is not a united Germany yet. This is what we call a defensive alliance. So what that means is these different little German city-states, and there's actually quite a few. This yellow territory is not a united city-state. There's a bunch of little ones in there. They are not united together as one army or one government. They're still separate, smaller city-states. But the problem with that is that then they would be easy to invade, just like Napoleon had done. So they create a defensive alliance, which says if one of them gets picked on, if, say, France or Russia or even the Austrian Empire were to invade a small German city-state, all of the German city-states in this defensive alliance would come together to defend that city-state. They would be on the defense because they were not the ones who started the war. They are just coming to the aid of somebody who got picked on. This is unlike an offensive alliance or an alliance that is unconditional. It doesn't matter what happens, the one country has the back of another country. This is different because then a German city-state could pick a fight with France or with Britain or with Sweden and Norway, and the other ones would have to come to their aid, even though that small German city-state would have been the one to start the war. That is not what this is. This is purely for defensive purposes. Now, why wouldn't the European powers just go ahead and create a united Germany? Why not? Why do this complicated defensive alliance thing? Well, if they unite Germany in the center of Europe here, what they're concerned about is that Germany would become strong enough to conquer the rest of Europe, just like Napoleon had just done from France. So that is why they come up with this defensive alliance. It definitely helps that Prussia, up here in the green, has the best army on continental Europe at this time. So they definitely don't want to make Germany too strong. However, this is an era in European history when there is a lot of nationalism going around, right? The British are very nationalistic, the French are nationalistic, they're building empires around the world, and the Germans are feeling kind of nationalistic too. There's this idea that they deserve to have a country for themselves, or at least some people in Germany feel like Germans should unite together because they have common ethnicity a lot of times, a common religion a lot of times, a common language, common traditions, and so even though there's obviously variation within the German population, there are German Jews, there are German Catholics and German Protestants, they some Germans feel like there's enough that unites them that means it's silly for them to all be split up and weak when they could be united and strong. So that's going to lead to the German unification and the Franco-Prussian War. So how is it that Germany is going to unite? We've talked about the fact that Germany ultimately unites already in some of our lessons, but we never looked at exactly how that happens. And now we're going to do that because it becomes important to understand World War I, in which Germany will be one of the fighting powers, to understand how Germany got to be Germany to begin with. So doing this will be under the leadership of Otto von Bismarck. So he is a leading politician in Prussia, right? And he is very intelligent strategist, tactician, and leader. And he will try and rally support amongst the different German city-states under the slogan blood and iron. And the blood refers not to injuries or war deaths, but to nationality, right? An idea of a German ethnicity. And iron, that's where you get the idea of force, weaponry, and battle. So the German unification is going to be kind of masterminded by Otto von Bismarck. And he is going to do that through war, but not by conquering other German city-states, but through the Franco-Prussian War, which he will engineer. And by this idea of building up a unified identity in Germany, which will include offering all Germans healthcare. So universal healthcare in Germany for all Germans, which is something that the United States still doesn't have. It's a promise that's made as a compromise with the socialists and the communists in the country. So there are people in Germany who are arguing that all people should be given what they need to survive, that all people should be taken care of. And Bismarck isn't necessarily, he's definitely not a communist or a socialist. He is a conservative, but he's willing to make this compromise and offer this to the German people as a way of getting more support. Because, I mean, that's a big benefit. If you join Germany, this new Germany that they're creating, you get healthcare guaranteed to you. Even if you're poor, you would get access to doctors and medicine. And that's a pretty big incentive for a lot of people. But that's not quite the only part here. Again, we need some way to unify Germany physically, politically, under one government. And so the way to do this, again, this will be against the wishes of the rest of Europe. The way to get all these German city-states together is that he needs to do what? Well, he wants a unified government. He's got a confederation where the states have agreed to defend one another if one of them's attacked. So what does he need to do? Well, he's got to provoke a war. He can't start a war by being the first to attack, because then the other city-states won't have to defend him. He has to get another country to attack a German city-state. And that's a pretty big accomplishment. So, again, here is the map of Europe. This is the area we're looking to unify. And of course, the border is right here with France. We will be talking about the Balkans, which is this territory right here, later on. Okay, but right now we're going to focus on Germany and France. Okay, so the Franco-Prussian War. Again, should be pretty obvious. It takes place between France and the Prussians, which are Germans. Basically, up until this point in Europe, wars have been pretty quick lately. It's been a while since, for example, the 100 Years' War, the 30 Years' War. And the latest wars have been pretty fast. Nothing like the 4-year-long U.S. Civil War that will be taking place in the 1860s. In Europe, and this is in the 1870s now, in Europe, these wars are pretty short. We're looking at like maybe a couple months, sometimes even as few as a couple weeks. So Bismarck doesn't see this as a big gamble. It's not like millions of lives will be put on the line here. He essentially engineers a situation where he manages to make it look like France has been insulted, and France needs to attack to prove that it is as great as it says it is. You don't need to worry about the details of exactly how he managed to do this. Just know that Bismarck's very good he's a master diplomat, a master strategist, and he managed to basically make the French feel like there was no alternative in order to restore their national honor besides attacking. So this is my France with a baguette with a nail in it there, right? It says no, 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 right? Okay. So the Franco-Prussian War, here's what happens. France invades with about 200,000 men, just popping over the border right there, okay? This is just a little invasionary force. I mean, 200,000 men is a lot, but not for a full army. And essentially, they're looking to get Germany to counterattack, the German city-states. They want Germany to invade France so that the French can be on the defensive. Why would you want to be on the defensive in a war? What could some of the advantages to fighting a war where the enemy is attacking and you're just trying to hold your position? Well, it gives you shorter supply lines. It gives you home field advantage. You know the terrain. All you need to do is hold your position as opposed to making advances. And this seemed like the better option for France at the time. However, Prussia is extremely good. As I said, it's the best military in Europe. And so its army is able to outmaneuver the French. It can maneuver 1 million men, which this is very advanced for this period. You don't have email or telephones where you can make phone calls to your generals to coordinate this. So they have these troop movements down to the minute, and they're able to marshal over 1 million men and move them to encircle the French, right? To outflank them and then basically destroy them, okay? So the French lose the war, and Napoleon III, Napoleon's nephew, he gives up power in France and resigns, or what we say abdicates, in humiliation. So that's it. That's the war. It's not terribly long. Not even a lot of people lose their lives, although any loss of life is, of course, tragic. And that's it. So let's see. Did Bismarck get what he wanted? Well, you have Germany becomes Germany, right? The Prussian War ends in 1871, and that's when Germany unites. So yes, the Germans feel like, woohoo, we rock, look at us, we beat France, which just used to be this big power with Napoleon, right? And now his nephew's on the throne, but we beat him, and we did it together, right? And so this motivates the Germans to really come together, and again, the promise of the healthcare also acts as an incentive. And the King of Prussia, Wilhelm, or in German, the W's are V's, so Wilhelm I, he becomes no longer king, but Kaiser Wilhelm of the new German Empire. So Kaiser means emperor. It comes from the word Caesar, right? It's the German for Caesar. So this idea that he is the emperor of a new German empire. And in Germany, that will be called the Second Reich. So for those of you who are history buffs, the word Reich might ring a bell for you, as in the Third Reich, which will be Hitler's empire that he's building, and he says it'll last 1,000 years, which he's clearly wrong. But Hitler didn't just come up with that out of the blue, right? He's counting from somewhere. If he's the Third Reich, well, it's because this one is the German Second Reich, and the First Reich would be the Holy Roman Empire in German history. Okay, so we've got our new German Empire. Here we go. Okay. So we should be done, right? That's it. The Germans are united. France has lost the war, okay, but you know they only lost a couple 100,000 troops. Not the end of the world. We should be done. But of course, it's not that simple, right? So this is Kaiser Wilhelm. Wilhelm does not listen to Bismarck's advice, and he sends troops to occupy Paris, which means they're taking the capital city, which is a huge insult and a matter of national shame for the French. He then forces the French government to agree to pay for all of the war, despite the fact that they were kind of goaded into it, right? And that they've just now lost, now they have to pay for these damages. That's like rubbing salt into the wound. It really makes this loss burn. And Bismarck doesn't think this is a good idea because that's going to make the French pretty angry, right, at the Germans. And Bismarck isn't looking to really make enemies. He just wanted to have an excuse to unite his German city-states. And Bismarck decides to take Alsace-Lorraine. This is this kind of neon yellow right here. It's two provinces, Alsace and Lorraine, that the French had taken way back under Louis XIV, and they'd taken it from the Germans. Again, Germany wasn't a unified Germany at the time, but this territory here has a mixture of French and German speakers. It had belonged to France at this point for about 200 years, and now Germany is, in their mind, taking it back for Germany. Right? So as a result, the French lose Alsace-Lorraine. Right? So they're pretty upset about that. They lose Paris temporarily. So even once the German troops leave Paris and go home, well, it leaves what we call a power vacuum. It's not clear who's in charge of Paris. Napoleon III has resigned. He's not there anymore. Then they were occupied by the Germans. So now it's not clear. And what happens is a bunch of French communists take over, and they declare that Paris will now be a communist utopia. They're going to get rid of capitalism, and they are going to be their own thing. And so they quit France. They secede from France. Obviously, the rest of France is not going to allow their capital to be taken, or to just leave the country. And so there's a civil war between Paris and the rest of France. And so now what we have is not only do you have a national tragedy, because the French just lost this war and had to pay these war damages, but you also have a fratricidal tragedy. What that means, fratricidal, is brother killing brother, so a civil war. And so whose fault is this, according to the French? Well, it's all the Germans' fault. So how are the French going to feel about the Germans? Oh, they hate them. A just deep-seated, burning hatred that will last and fester and grow up through World War I. Right? So when we talk about the Franco-Prussian War sowing the seeds for World War I, this is what I mean. The French are going to be motivated by this hatred of the Germans because of the Franco-Prussian War. I mean, they hate the Germans so much that they get rid of Christmas trees in France, right? The Christmas tree comes from a pagan tradition back before Germany was Christian, and for a winter festival, with the evergreen symbolizing light in the middle of the dark winter, and the candles, again, that the days will get longer even though you're in the middle of winter. And so when Germany and France and all those territories in Europe eventually convert to Christianity, they pull in these traditions. And so when France had taken Alsace-Lorraine 200 years ago, the German speakers there had practiced, had the tradition of having a Christmas tree. And so to show solidarity and kind of melding this territory with the others, the rest of France had started using Christmas trees. And now they're so angry at the Germans that they get rid of the Christmas tree. Sort of like when the Americans got upset at France in 2003, when France would not go to war in Iraq with the United States. And so some people in the United States started calling French fries freedom fries because they were so mad at the French. They didn't want to call them French fries. Right? It's the same kind of thing, just 100 years later. Okay, so our ultimate results. The one thing that's going to unite French political parties is that they hate Germany. They want revenge. The communists don't agree with the conservatives. There are all kinds of different political parties in France that want different things, but they all can agree that they hate the Germans and they want revenge on Germany. But France knows it can't be Germany on its own, because in terms of the number of people they have and how industrialized they are, France is actually outmatched by Germany. Germany's gotten much more industrialized than France has for a couple of reasons that we don't really have time to go into. So France is going to need allies, and if it wants revenge. And Germany knows that France is going to need allies, and so its entire strategy to prevent another war and to prevent France from getting its revenge is going to be to make sure the rest of Europe is happy with Germany and therefore has no reason to side with France. So we have this map. Who in this area is Germany really going to make sure they need to keep happy? Well, the biggest possible threats, obviously France, but they've made them mad, so they're off. We're going to need to look at Britain, the Russian Empire, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and the Ottoman Empire. Italy has recently unified, but it is not strong enough to challenge Germany in any real sense at this point. So, Bismarck, again, a master diplomat, he's going to go to the rest of Europe, who is nervous at this point, because again, the whole point of not uniting Germany was, hey, we don't want a really strong country in the middle of Europe that could start attacking other countries. And now we've had Germany win this war with France, which technically it did not start. It didn't fire the first shot, but it fought this war and it united itself into the very thing that Europe said it didn't want. So there's a good chance that the other countries are going to have to tell Germany, hey, you have to split yourselves up. You can't stay united. So Germany, under von Bismarck, is very clever, and it goes to the countries and says, hey, we get it. We know you're nervous. We understand. But the problem with the plan initially was that we got picked on. I mean, we weren't united. We were divided into these small city-states, and that's why France thought it could attack us, because we looked weak. And so for our protection, you should let us stay one united Germany. I mean, we're one people. We speak German. We have a similar culture with one another. We should be allowed to stay together. And we promise we're not going to make any more trouble. We just want to be united. It wasn't our fault. We got picked on. France is the bad guy here. And so he convinces the rest of Europe to say, yeah, you know, France, they had Napoleon. They were the source of all these problems. They attacked Germany. It's really France's fault. And so Bismarck gets exactly what he wants. He gets to stay as a united Germany. And he gets France outcast as the bad boys of Europe, right? So really, what has just happened to France? It's like if you're in the car on your way on a long road trip with your parents, and you are in the backseat, and you're France, and your little brother, Germany, has been poking you and poking you and poking you for an hour. And you have had it, and you are fed up, and finally you turn around and you grab their hand and you smack them. And your mother turns around and she yells at you, right? And says, oh, your poor little brother, why'd you be so mean to him? That's what's just happened. And how you feel in that situation, frustrated, indignant, that the world is unfair and unjust, that is how France is feeling, right? And so their motivation for revenge has just gotten even stronger. But Bismarck's going to manage to keep these other European powers happy. In Britain, well, Britain is an industrial power. So what are they going to want? They're going to want Germany to buy the materials that they produce, right? They're going to be able to sell Germany raw materials from the rest of their colonies, because Germany doesn't have an empire. It's calling itself an empire, but it's really in Europe. So Britain will sell raw materials to Germany from the rest of its colonies, and it will sell extra products they've produced in their factories to Germany as well. So Britain's happy because they've got more profit that they're making off of Germany. The Ottomans. The Ottoman Empire is not particularly industrialized, and so Germany offers to help them industrialize and build up factories. The Ottoman Empire has been losing territory. It's now just this darker orange color, and so the Ottomans are looking at the fact that they need better technology to hold on to the territory they have, and the Germans are willing to provide it for them. And then Russia and Austria, they have competing interests. They both want territory in the Balkans and in Poland. And so Germany's just going to play both sides, acting like a friend. Because Germany can't give them each what they want, because it would make the other one upset. So he just plays them off, basically going to Austria saying, I know, Russia's so ridiculous. I can't believe they want this territory down here in the Balkans. Obviously, that's right by you. You should have that territory. And then he goes to Russia and goes, I know, Austria is so unreasonable. Obviously, you should have the territory in the Balkans because these people speak Slavic languages like you do. I don't know what they're thinking. And obviously, you also deserve to have Poland because Poland speaks a Slavic language. Those Austrians, they're crazy. And that works. It works for a good while until there's a change in leadership. So Wilhelm I dies. The Kaiser dies. And so, as with any emperor, who takes over? His son, Wilhelm II. Wilhelm II is young, energetic, inexperienced. He wants to make a mark on the world. He wants to break out from under his father's shadow. And Bismarck was his shadow, was his father's advisor. So Bismarck is conservative. He's cautious. He's a thoughtful strategist. He makes sure he's playing a game of chess 50 moves ahead of everybody else. And Kaiser Wilhelm wants to just start moving the pieces around willy-nilly, right, to make his mark on the world. And so obviously the two of them are not going to get along. And so Kaiser Wilhelm, he fires Bismarck. And so the man who's kept this international system carefully balanced in Germany's interests has now just been fired by a young, brash leader. And Wilhelm starts making moves that are going to put Germany's interests in jeopardy. He's going to side with Austria over Russia because the Austrians are Germans just like the Germans are. They speak a Germanic language, incredibly close to actual German. He increases help to Turkey and helps build train lines right near the Russian border, which freaks Russia out because Russia and the Turks, the Ottoman Empire, have been competing for a while. There have been several border wars between the two of them. So train lines near the Russian border, you can put troops on trains and make it easier to fight a war with Russia. So Russia is very upset. Not only has Wilhelm taken the side of Austria, but they're also helping the Turks. These are two of Russia's main enemies. And then Wilhelm decides he wants his own empire outside of Europe, in Africa. So this is where you get the Scramble for Africa and the Berlin Conference, where the Europeans meet to carve up Africa. What is this going to do for British relations? The British had the empire in Africa, along with a couple other countries, like France and the Netherlands. And now they're going to be competing with the Germans. And they're not going to be able to sell their resources to Germany anymore because Germany's going to go take its own resources. So that's not good for the British relations and German relations. Meanwhile, what's France been doing, right? Have they stopped going after allies? No, absolutely not. But now it's looking a lot better for them because Russia and Great Britain are threatened by Germany. So they're going to be interested in allying with France. Meanwhile, Austria and the Ottoman Empire are going to side with Germany because they are gaining support from Germany. Italy will also ally itself with Germany, but it doesn't really mean it. It's more just a piece of paper to sign to, they think the Germans will be a little bit more in line with their interests. But when World War I starts, the Italians they can't be counted on. They're going to wind up switching sides. But ultimately what we have is Great Britain, France, and Russia on one side, Germany, Austria, and the Ottoman Empire on the other side. And these are going to be the major sides in World War I. To make this even more risky and complicated, it's not one agreement that puts the three on each side. It's not that Britain, France, and Russia have all signed the same treaty, and Germany, Austria, and the Ottoman Empire have all signed the same treaty. They haven't. Britain and France have made an agreement. France and Russia have made an agreement. Germany and Austria have made an agreement. Germany and the Ottoman Empire have made a separate agreement. And so some of these agreements don't have the same terms. France and Russia signed an agreement that said it's not just to defend one another. So unlike that German defensive alliance we had earlier in this lesson, it's not just if Russia gets attacked that France will come to its aid. It's also if Russia starts a war, right? France will back it up no matter what. And the vice versa. If France starts a war, Russia will back it up no matter what. Same with Germany and Austria. No matter what the other country does, if they find themselves in a fight, even if they started it, the other country will come to their aid. Now, this is dangerous. It's much more dangerous than a defensive alliance. Because if you have promised somebody you're going to back them up no matter what, well, that's going to give them a lot more confidence to act however they want to act, because you've promised to be in their corner no matter what. Think about it if, like, World War I were like a bar fight. If you have maybe a friend that's like 5'6", and they get frustrated with some guy at the other end of the bar who's loud and talking about, I don't know, their favorite sports team, and he's saying how stupid they are. if your friend is only 5'6" and the guy who's bad-mouthing the sports team is 6'11", right, and, you know, has an extra 100 pounds on your friend, well, your friend's probably not going to pick a fight with that guy. But if your friend knows that you're going to back them up, no matter what, then he might start feeling a little bit more willing to throw the first punch, to call that guy out on what he's saying about the sports team, to throw the first punch, because in your friend's mind, he's not alone. It's going to be the two of you against this big guy. That's exactly the calculation that France and Russia and Germany and Austria have going on in their heads. So an unconditional alliance is a lot more risky than a defensive alliance, because it frees countries up, it makes them more willing to pick fights with people bigger than them, and will drag in other countries that maybe didn't need to be involved in this fight. Okay, so these are the three main countries on each side during World War I. These will be your Allied powers. These will be called the Central Powers, not the Axis. That's World War II. These are Central Powers, okay? But that's not it, because this is a world war. And right now, all we have are some countries in Europe and 5 countries in Europe and 1 in, the Middle East. So it gets more complicated. Other things to keep in mind. Belgium, remember, only recently its own country after the Congress of Vienna. It's Britain's little brother. So when Belgium went to the Congress of Vienna, they said, hey, we want to be our own country. Historically, they'd been dominated by France, but the Belgians some of them speak French, but others speak Flemish, and so they want to be their own country. But the rest of Europe was like, well, but you're so little. It won't take very much for France to just gobble you back up, and then we're back where we started. And so Great Britain stepped in, because their royal family has ties with the Belgian royal family. And Britain said, look, we promise we will protect Belgium's independence. If anybody messes with Belgium, we will defend them. Now, this is defensive, so if Belgium picks a fight, Britain doesn't have to back them up. But if anybody invades Belgium, Britain will come to its rescue. That will come into play when we get into World War I. Additionally, Austria and Russia have been carving up the Balkans, this territory here. This used to belong to the Ottoman Empire over here. OE is Ottoman Empire. But with nationalism and the weakening Ottomans, because their government's gotten a little stagnant and they haven't been industrializing, these territories are breaking away. They have sometimes different religions, so some of them are Christian, some of them are Muslim. The Ottomans are a Muslim empire. But they also speak different languages, right? You've got the Greeks, you've got the Macedonians, you've got the Albanians, the Serbians, the Bosnians. So they've been breaking away. And Austria and Russia have been looking to increase their influence in this area. Austria wants to gain more territory and resources and coastline for trade. So does Russia, for those same reasons. Russia looks at some of these territories who speak Slavic languages, like the Serbians, as their little brothers, because they speak the same kind of language, not exactly Russian. And again, it will help increase Russia's power. So they're competing here. This is where World War I is going to start. And then, of course, just a reminder that that Russia and the Ottoman Empire do not like each other. Not one bit. Okay? They've been competing over borders and territory for quite a while. So this is what it breaks down to. This complex system of alliances. Italy is going to sign on with Germany and Austria. Germany and Austria signed on in 1879. They're going to ally with the Ottoman Empire officially for military purposes when World War I starts, but they will have been helping them out before that. Bulgaria will be like the little brother to these places, whereas for Russia, Serbia is the little brother. Russia signed an agreement with France. Later, Britain will sign separate agreements with France and Russia. And of course, it's been Belgium's big brother since 1839. You don't have to memorize the dates between these alliances, but the point is that this is a very complicated kind of system of dominoes, that if you knock one of these over, it's going to have a ripple effect across this spectrum. But every country thinks it's going to be okay. Every country thinks they have the system beat. They all sat down, they looked at a map of Europe and what information they had, which, for the record, not all of these alliances are known by every other country, because some of them, for example, Italy, conduct a lot of their treaties in secret. But they looked at what they thought the game was. They drew up a set of plans, right? The problem is each country pretty much only drew up 2 plans. a small-scale war plan, that if just me and my neighbor go to war, or just two countries are at war, and then a full-out massive, everybody in Europe is fighting each other kind of plan. Why is that a problem? Why did they only draw two of these plans? Well, it's a problem because it's like if your only two options are a BB gun or a bazooka. Like, that is not great, because if the BB gun isn't going to be sufficient, now all your only option is the bazooka, the rocket launcher, right? You don't have anything in between. You didn't bring a taser. You didn't bring a slingshot. You didn't bring a handgun or a rifle. You just brought a BB gun and a bazooka. So we're going to see this spiral out of control very quickly. Why did they only draw up these two plans? Well, here's your pop culture reference for today. It's the difference between Batman and Xanatos. So, those of you who watched the Disney cartoon Gargoyles might know Xanatos. He's kind of he's a big question mark for a lot of the movie, or a lot of the TV show. Is he a good guy? Is he a bad guy? Is he the nemesis? Can you trust him? Batman, hopefully most of you are familiar with. So to explain this, I'm going to flip to the next slide and talk to you about the nature of these guys. So for Batman, if any of you, that's my bat, okay? Okay, Batman has a superpower. I know people think that he doesn't. Here's Xanatos. But he actually does. If you read the comics from back in the 1930s, Batman, his biggest skill, the thing that sets him apart from everybody else on the planet, is not his money, although that doesn't hurt. But it's the fact that he is supposedly the world's greatest detective. So Batman studies his opponents, and he understands their behavior. He knows how to understand clues. And when he sets a trap, he basically knows you, right? And so he's going to give you a choice between X and Y. And he knows you so well that he knows that you're going to pick X. And so he will be waiting for you. And you lose. Whereas if you had picked, there's my bat. If you had picked Y, actually, he wouldn't have been there. And you would have won. That is you being happy. There you go. You win. Okay? But Batman knows you so well that he only really needs the one plan to be there. Xanatos, he does the same thing, where he's going to give you a choice between A and B. But Xanatos isn't playing. If you pick A, Xanatos is there. And you lose. But if you pick B, he also has a plan for that. And you lose. He has contingencies for either choice that you make. With Xanatos, you have lost the game as soon as you've started playing it. What the Europeans need are plans like Xanatos. They need multiple options that no matter what happens, they've got somebody ready to be there. Oops, sorry. But what they have is this, okay? So that's the state of affairs. But seriously, everybody thinks it's going to be fine. Really, okay? Everyone is hoping and planning for a quick, fast, offensive war. They think that it's going to be fast. Where would they have gotten that idea from? Why would they think an offensive strategy is the strategy to pursue instead of a defensive strategy? Well, because in the Franco-Prussian War, that's what they saw happen. It was fast, just like all these other wars that had been fought in Europe recently. Again, if they had been paying attention to what the Americans had been doing in their 4-year-long civil war, they might have seen this coming, but they weren't. And so the European wars recently have been in colonies where they technologically outmatch the people they're fighting against. And then in Europe, they've been pretty short, fast wars without a lot of brand new technology. So to them, it should just look like business as usual. Fast wars. The last war with the Franco-Prussian War, the French tried a defensive approach. They lost. So obviously now everybody thinks that they should use an offensive approach. Okay? People think they're going to be home for Christmas. That the war is going to get declared in July, which is what we'll look at next time we have a lesson. And it'll be 6 months tops. I mean, that's probably even too long. As you know, it turns out to be 4 years. So on the eve of World War I, and we're wrapping up here, there's lots of new technology. Again, we've had the Industrial Revolution. Europe has not fought a massive war since the Industrial Revolution, except in colonies where, again, their industrial technology outmatches the people they're fighting against. So there are machine guns, trains, planes, telephones, all kinds of stuff. There will be poison gas that will be developed. But they haven't fought a war like that. And so it's going to be pretty new territory. So they've got lots of new technology they're eager to use. There's a delicate and very elaborate system of alliances where if you pull one, the others are going to come into play. And a lot of what we call militarism with an arms race. Militarism is when you glorify the military, you glorify war, you teach your children that the way to really be a man is to go off and fight wars. You teach your daughters that what you really want is a war hero, that this is what makes a manly man and can defend your family. People will basically be chomping at the bit. They will be so eager to go fight this war. And on top of that, you have an arms race, a situation where countries are trying to outproduce each other when it comes to military weapons. And so the more weapons you have, the more likely you are to use them. You know, there's a saying that if all you have is a hammer, everything starts to look like a nail. If you've put so many resources in your military, and that's really what you've invested in, instead of diplomacy, instead of peaceful means of communication, then and conflict resolution, then your only tool really becomes the military to settle disputes. And in a hyper-militaristic society, that's the way you think things should be done, is to use the military. And nationalism. Again, we've talked about nationalism, but lots of people and some rulers are eager for war. Again, they want to prove their group is the best. They've been going out building empires, taking over control of parts of Africa and Asia and historically the Americas as well, trying to prove to everybody that not only are they superior to the people they've colonized, but they're also superior to other Europeans because they have a bigger empire. Well, they're still fighting about who really is the superior European, and so what's the better way of proving that besides just, well, beat them in a war, right? If Britain really wants to prove it's better than Germany, then Britain should be able to beat them in a war. And so, of course, they will, because they're superior. If Germany wants to prove they're superior to Britain, well, beat them in a war. Same for France and Russia, etc., etc. So, World War I. It's going to seem like a great idea at the time. Short war, offensive, we've got contingency plans, we're good to go, we'll prove that we're the best, we've got all these arms, we may as well use them. But I want you to keep these lessons in mind going forward. Number one, World War I teaches us that history has a tendency to come back and bite you. Everything that's done in the Franco-Prussian War, especially the things that are done to France by Germany when Germany wins, seizing Paris, making them pay for reparations, taking territory. Those things are going to come back and bite Germany because France has been meditating on these things, just mulling over them and just ruminating, and it's just been festering for so long. Number two, nothing ever goes exactly to plan. Like I said, these countries will have plans, but they will not work out the way they expect them to. Germany will have a particularly impressive plan called the Schlieffen Plan and will come very close to working. But it doesn't. Number three, what seems like a good idea right now can lead to horrible, horrible consequences down the road. And that will bring us into trench warfare, the use of different military technologies, etc. And finally, a bonus lesson. Countries often try to fight the current war with the last war's strategy, but this war's technology. And this is not a winning combination. And so we will look at this again in one of our upcoming lessons. This sets the stage for World War I. So next time, that's what we will be covering.